right, so I'm Garrett McClintock, and I am here with AcreTrader. We are a technology company democratizing the land transaction market. So today I want to talk a little bit about land investing, why it's interesting, and what the options are for how to do it. Then I want to talk a little bit about land and the agriculture industry in general, as well as where we are today. Finally, I'll speak a little bit more about what we're doing at AcreTrader, considering our view on the industry and where it is today. I might be moving around a little bit, so if I'm slow on the slides, it'll give me a little bit of break. This is our disclaimer, so my legal team slide. And finally, farmland as an asset. Now, I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, so I'm going to keep this section brief, but it's always good to have a short reminder about why farmland has performed well recently. Now, the primary reason is that we have a decreasing amount of supply, increasing amount of demand. We're losing up to 3 acres a minute, and we have more and more mouths to feed, and that's both human and animal mouths to feed. So the story here is compelling, especially as you look further into the future. Oops, there we go. That's the one I was talking about. I told you you're going to have to work with me on the slides. So not only is farmland structurally attractive, it has historically performed well and had low volatility. Essentially what that means is that the price fluctuates very infrequently compared to how well it's going up. So there's also low correlation to other asset classes. This slide is a little confusing, but essentially what it means is as the price of other assets moves up and down, farmland has remained independent of those assets. The reason why that's important is because of this slide. It is during the Great Recession, farmland, you can see, was just kind of normal. It was going along at its own pace while the stocks in the S&P 500 were all over the place. Well, this and more is what's bringing investors into our industry. Unfortunately, investing in farmland isn't easy. In fact, it's kind of hard. So it's hard to find enough good farms to get in front of you to think about which ones do you want to invest. It's hard to manage the farm if that's not something you actively do day to day. And most people can frankly only buy 1 or 2 unless they're a farmer. And that's really not very diversified if you're thinking about farmland as an investable asset. So honestly, how do you get into this asset? Now, of course, we're over here on the top left and kind of highlighted, but we're not saying we're the only way to do this. Frankly, this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. However, we do feel like our process has some distinct advantages, and we have fairly competitive fees compared to the rest of the market. So here's a little bit more about us in general. We were founded with the simple idea that it should be easier to invest in farmland all over the US and now internationally. We have a few Australian offerings as well. So to do this, we provide low minimum investment sizes, so as low as $15,000, but all the way up to $50,000, depending on the offering. We have strong diligence materials to really help you understand what those investments are. We have competitive fee structure. You will notice I keep saying that. And we have deal transparency. We try to really make it clear what you're investing in. And we have an investor relations team, as well as a farm team, who's there to take your calls and help you understand the different qualities of different individual farms. So how does it actually work? Well, the way it works is we take an individual farm, we put that tract in an LLC, so the title is owned by an LLC, and then our investors will go in and buy shares of that LLC. We then, as AcreTrader, rent the land to the farmer and take care of all the rest for the investors. The investor has a truly passive investment. Now, on the farmer side, that's attractive too, because frankly, I know a lot of farmers who have grown through finding different investors to help them grow. But they have trouble, or not trouble, but they have a lot of work put into managing their various investors. And if we can be that one financial partner to have in a farmer's back pocket, we feel like we can provide a service to them as well. So these are a few things that we look into on every single farm. For some of y'all, this will be, pretty basic stuff. For others, it's quite detailed. And this is only an example of the types of things we look into. But our goal is to make this as simple as we can for the investor. Further behind the curtain, We have a team of people working to think about all of our transactions, not only sourcing, not only getting further due diligence, but then closing. Any one of you that's worked on a closing knows it's not as easy as you'd like it to be, and pretty much every time there's at least one little small thing that goes wrong. We're here to take care of that both for the buyer and the seller and make that as easy as possible. So many people think of AcreTrader as just the website they see on the front of the web page, but really what we've built is a finely tuned land transaction machine. So zooming out a little bit at the industry itself. The bad news when it turns out we're behind in terms of digitization. Basically, we're just talking about how much technology we're using compared to other industries. Now, this study is done by McKinsey a few years back, but personally, as someone who grew up in agriculture, it kind of pisses me off to see us at the bottom. Now, I'm going to show you a few more that kind of illustrate the same thing. When you look at property and financial technology in the residential industry over the last 30 years, you see all of these new innovations. And yet in the land, in the same 30 years, there's very little that has helped us improve and be better, make us more transparent. Here's the last one I'll show you. This is a slide of all of the different fintech and proptech companies in residential real estate today. All of them have a small niche, but they all serve the consumer in a variety of different ways. Now, what you should take away from this is that there's a lot of opportunity for companies like mine, for companies like People's, and many others who are trying to make this process of buying and selling land easier for people who want to be involved in it. So what won't work? Well, one of the things that won't work is just saying, we're going to throw AI and machine learning at it. Frankly, what we believe is that we do need to progress. We do need to change the way we do things, as people in business and life have been doing for generations. But we also need to recognize that technology is ultimately a tool. It enables smart people to ask better questions and make decisions faster than they would be otherwise. And so that's really what we're trying to focus on, is how do we enable smart people throughout the industry to do a little bit better. So we'll spend a little bit of time on how we're trying to do that as a business. And I think the easiest place for me to start, and where I try to always start, is thinking about our vision as a company. So our vision as a company is buying and selling land becomes common, transparent, and easy. Well, it only becomes common if it is both transparent and easy, because people who don't understand the industry need both of those other two things to come in. And that's a good thing for all of us, because we should have more partners involved in what we're doing day to day. Now, the way we make it transparent and easy is through our mission. We're trying to empower customers to buy and sell land smarter with advanced technology, data, and expertise. Now, that's a mouthful. So I think the better way to think about this is, if I can just flip through, how it works in our day-to-day. So AcreTrader is actually, we have 3 different products as a company. The first one you're going to see on the top left here is probably the one you're most familiar with. It is, this product brings new buyers into the market. So we have about 50,000, or maybe, actually we're getting closer to 80,000 registered customers online right now who are looking at all of our farms on a weekly basis. So those are new people who are interested in partnering with people in our industry in different ways. On the top right is AcrePro. So if you think about AcreTrader being a one-to-many transaction, AcrePro is our brokerage where we have one-to-one transaction. Essentially, the reason that exists is because people kept calling AcreTrader and saying, can I buy a single farm? Can I sell my farm? But it wasn't necessarily the small box of things that we buy on the AcreTrader platform. That didn't mean it shouldn't be sold and there wouldn't be a buyer that was interested. It just wasn't right for our platform. And then the last thing you'll see at the bottom is Acre Maps. So that is a new initiative we've had and been working on last year, and just publicly, we've launched a beta this year. And that is I'm going to tell you actually a little bit more about it in some further slides. But essentially what I want you to focus on right now is, it says the best land data there. So why is land data important? Well, and I think this slide is actually mistitled. I think our land strategy in a sector with, let's say, a not pervasive MLS, because there are a few MLSs and people participate in those, but it's not as pervasive as in commercial or residential real estate. And so ultimately, the information that we all have has to be gathered very manually, and it's kind of difficult to find. So this gets to our lack of transparency in that part of our mission. When we realized this, we wanted to build a tool for ourselves because we're buying 1 to 2 farms a week right now. At some point, that's going to be 2 to 3 farms a week, and we want to continue to grow that. So if we're going to do that, we have to have better information. I mentioned earlier, we want to ask better questions and be able to make decisions faster. But we needed tools to help us do that. And so we started to build acre maps. But ultimately, what we decided is we wanted to share that with the public. Maybe not every single piece of information we have, but as much as we could. And part of the reason is we believe if buyers and sellers are more informed, we can bring more deals to the market. And ultimately, we want to be the best source of truth and the place for people to go to understand land and why it transacts. So I want to show you a little bit more about this tool. We're going to go over a few slides, but I will prompt you again. I would suggest really the best way to get to know this is to go to our website at acremaps.com and sign up for a trial version. So the first thing I'll show you is this is elevation data. So the reason we like to see this is that if you'll notice down in the bottom right there, you're going to be very red. So that's probably a much lower area than if you see up at the top where it's blue. Ultimately, that's telling you how does water move on and off this field, which is valuable when you think about how do you grow a crop and where are you likely to have greater yields and lesser yields. This is something you'll see on similar products. It's essentially how do you find a landlord and how do you find property data. What's unique about acre maps is its searchability. So we are better than anyone on the market right now in terms of being able to find a specific property owner all over the US. It's incredibly fast and easy to use. In fact, our team was really focused on a few things when they built the initial version of this. Number one was how easy is it to use, how navigable is it? Number two was getting the best information, because there are other tools that have a few things, but we found as analysts, we were pulling up 8 different tools. You pull up Google Earth so you could see different types of imagery over time. You pull up maybe an acre value to see some property data. You would pull up Surety Pro to get different maps because that was what most people wanted to see. And we said, why are we using 7 different tools when we could create our own that just has one? So this is something you'll also be familiar with. It's just showing you an example of how we look at property data, crop data from year to year. What's actually really fun, and we had somebody share this in our on our message app today, but if you zoom out, it's really fascinating to be able to see not just one field, and you can see it a little bit here too, how did the whole county look in respect to that one field? What was pervasive around that county? Was it mostly soybeans? Was it mostly corn? It enables you to ask questions like, why did that farmer choose to do corn when everyone else is doing soybeans? And that just brings about the better type of questions we like to see. So finally, we have comparable sales data. So this is something we're trying to work on and build more and more. We want to have our own comparable sales data. You can buy some comparable sales that several companies sell, but we understand that this is only as valuable as we can prove. So if you find something like something that was pretty common among other tools I've used is maybe those 4 dots right there would all be the same sale, and they would all have the same price on them. And so ultimately, those 4 dots were not sold individually for $1 million. It was the 4 of them combined was $1 million. And so with that bad data, you're not able to ask those good questions, and you may have a misunderstanding of what's going on. And the hard thing is not when those 4 are together, it's when 3 of them are together and another one was way down here. And so you have a totally thrown off understanding of what the price per acre was, what the dollar per PI was, or anything like that. So I want to tell you a little bit about our team before I open up for Q&A. First, I'm Garrett McClintock. I'm over here on the bottom left. I'm our COO. Before I joined AcreTrader, I was actually running a very large farm and several other ag businesses along with a family in Arkansas. Our founder and CEO, Carter Malloy, was supposed to be giving this presentation today, but unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it. Carter was a part of a founding team of a billion-dollar hedge fund, but he grew up with a dad that was a farmer, and he was trading farmland in the background. It's one of the few things they allowed him to invest in outside of his hedge fund. So he loved it. He was having some really good experiences, and he said, well, why can't everyone do this? He had a neighbor who asked him, hey, can I buy and sell land? And it was he was pretty quick to say, oops, no, you can't. The other thing from this slide that I want to point out is we try to surround ourselves with really smart people who ask us hard questions. You'll see on the bottom right, we have the chairman of the London Stock Exchange as well as the former CFO of Amazon, who are both on our advisory board. Not only do we have really great people who ask us good questions who are our advisors, but we have great people who are working on these products themselves. So Justin at the top left was a former analyst and data science guy at a massive and very profitable hedge fund. Jeff Lewis right there is the head of our brokerage. He was the former president of Remax. He had 100,000 agents globally working for him. He's bringing a lot of really good practices into what we do, while at the same time we're educating him that, you know what, farming and agriculture is not exactly like residential real estate. It's really important that we have this mix of people who have expertise from outside of the industry, as well as people who have expertise inside of the industry. And finally, John Gaby up there, he's important to know. He was a product manager at J.B. Hunt, where he led a team of 150 web developers. Right now, we have probably 30. At the end of the year, we're going to be at 90 web developers. We're building things and trying to get better every single day, and that guy is a big part of it. So this is my last slide, but it's something I want to talk about with all of you. There are ways we can work together. Ultimately, we're not here as AcreTrader to be a pure software company, a broker, a seller of maps. What we want to do is create a company where it's obvious it's in your best interest to work with us. We want to be able to help other people make money. And if you're able to make money by working with us, you will be able, or we're going to have a really big company, and we'll hopefully change the industry for the better along the way. So I would encourage you, come talk to me after, talk to one of the guys at our booth, but ultimately we're just trying to find really good partners to help grow our business. So that's it. Can I take some Q&A? Go ahead.
So I understand you make it easy to buy, but what about sell?
Yeah. All right. We do make it easy to sell as well. And honestly, we have a few different types of folks we work with, let's say on the supply side, so when we buy land. One is brokers. So we have several brokers who are repeat customers with us. And we do have an internal brokerage, so you know that means we're going to be taking a buy-side fee. If you're going to work with us once, that may not make sense. But if you're going to work with us over and over and over again, and you know that we're buying 1 to 2 farms a week and soon 2 to 3 and maybe 5 at some point, then it makes it a really easy check to say, can I sell this immediately? Being able to have speed, we close our farms usually in between 28 and 35 days after first call. That's a really attractive thing for a lot of buyers who, maybe they need to move into a 1031. Maybe they just need the cash. Maybe they found another opportunity that is closer to their home base. We're able to be there for those types of transactions. And then the other source of farms for us actually is farmers. So a lot of times we'll have farmers that approach us and say, look, we want to buy this farm, but I bought a farm last year and my banker says I can't go buy another one right now. But I'd love to farm this. I'd love to expand my operation. Can you help me? And we will say, look, here's our return profile. We will give you some options on how to work with us. We'll tell you, we will do a lease either between 1 and 5 years. You help us decide how to do that. We'll tell you what return we have to make. We don't want to buy way over market because that'll force us to charge you way too much rent. So why don't we figure out what's a reasonable rent where we can hit our return threshold, and then we can also buy the farm at a fair price. And that's where we've had a lot of deals come through, is we're trying to figure out how can we be a capital partner to people who want to grow their business. Does that answer your question? Cool. Yeah. It is. So we have lots of advisors who work with their clients on our platform. And we want to make that easier over time. It's one of the initiatives that we have laid out for ourselves this year. So that's on the client side. And then we actually also, you said institutions, I also need to think about farmland investing institutions. We also work with farmland investors professionally. A lot of times these people will have funds and they have an end of life, and we bought several farms from different partners who are here today. So we want to, as I said, we're trying to find as many partners all over the industry as we can. We've seen it done both ways, but we should talk more after this so we don't get too deep into the details. I'm sure, yeah, I'd be really interested to have that conversation now. Yeah, that's a good question. So we have farms in 14 states, as high in the Northeast as New York, as down to the Southeast in Georgia, over to California, up to Washington, all over the Midwest and the Delta. And we have all kinds of different crop types, from pecans to apples to olives to lots of corn and soybeans, because that's the majority of what the country is. And then as well as some cotton down in the South. I tell everybody I'm still looking for some sugar cane. Haven't found any sugar cane yet. That's a good question. So we try to do, a return profile can be a really tricky thing. We try to think about it in two different ways. First way is, what's your cap rate today? So how much cash are you being paid on the top line? Second way is, all right, well, this land should appreciate over time. It's really hard to project that piece. And so what we do is we say, well, we're going to remain agnostic. We take the appreciation component from NC Reef, which is a farmland index, and we say, all right, we're going to take the cap rate plus appreciation over the last 50 years for farmland. What we know is that number is absolutely wrong, but almost any number would be wrong. And so what we're trying to do is just be honest with the investor and say, this should appreciate over time. This is what it has done in the past. Here is how this asset is performing today. Does that make sense? That's a good question. So, and I gave you the simple answer. I'm going to go slightly deeper now. So roughly 3 to 3.5% is the annual return top line from rent right now. That's where we roughly target. And then appreciation over the last 50 years has been 5.9%. That's for row crops. When you look into permanent crops, most permanent crops are structured a little bit differently. So most investors want to be part of the production component of the land as well. So you're not just looking at what's your cash rent or is this a share rent. You're actually paying for the operation. So it's much closer to like what a 50-50 arrangement looks like here in the Midwest, except that the investor is going to be even more than 50% paying for inputs. They're going to be paying for a whole lot more. And so what we do then is we work with farmers in California or in Washington or in Georgia who may have orchards, and we say, hey, come put some of your money alongside our investors, and then you run this like a small investment fund for one property. And so what that enables this farmer to do is to grow his operation alongside of other investors, but also have their incentives aligned. So he's not just getting paid cash, X dollars an acre to go farm that farm. He's actually interested in the upside as well. Or she. So we have probably 6 to 8. We actually don't have farm managers on staff. That's another area where we're really interested in working with people who are already in those communities because we don't want to own every piece of the business. We think it's a lot better to work with people who are local and be able to build our business through working with people in the community. Yes, ma'am. That's a good question. So how much do our investors get to participate in management? You know, there are two sides to every coin. The answer is not much. When I said earlier, this is a truly passive investment, most people don't want that. And frankly, from our perspective, we don't want to be telling farmers what to do. It makes us a bad partner to farmers. And so we try to align incentives and say, how can we set up our relationship to have really a good long-term partnership, and then stay out of the way as much as we can. Obviously, there are certain things that, like, you don't want somebody who's acting as a bad partner. And so, like, if you looked at our contract, there are certain things you have to do. You can't steal from us, you can't wreck the land, you can't pour diesel out, you know, that kind of stuff. But mostly we just try to let farmers do their job. That's a good question. I'm going to give you my card, and we're going to set up a call with you and the MAPS team. So we have not tied that in yet. I think what we're trying to figure out is what are the marginal improvements that we can be making that we can tie back to a couple of key factors. So price is number one, and then there's some inherent quality that price is a signifier for, but not always. Price doesn't always match up with quality exactly. There are a lot of different factors. So evapotranspiration I'm not smart enough to correlate that to underlying water right now. And how long is that? We could talk more about this, but I'm sure you also have to look at many years of data to understand if that was a blip or a trend. Oh man, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to ask my team about that. That's great. So not yet is the answer. It definitely would be. Thanks. Sir. So not right now. You cannot 1031 into our platform. I imagine that will be something we will build out in the future. It's actually more interesting for us on the supply side. So I've talked to farmers before who said, look, I want to retire. I have a bunch of land. Nobody's going to take it, or nobody's going to farm it in my family. But at the same time, if it's close by, I want to go metal. And so I want to sell this land, not have to think about it, but also not have to pay taxes. And so I think the 1031 opportunity is much more interesting for some of those farmers than it would be for our investors. Not that they wouldn't like it. And then holding period. Holding period usually comes in a couple different tranches. We have a 3 to 5 year. Generally, those are ones that we're doing some improvement on. And then we have a 5 to 10 year. Some will go longer. That's usually see that in permanent crops. We actually have some investors who are interested in longer hold periods in general, like 15 or 20 year hold periods. I think before we do that, we want to be really careful and think about how can we set up secondary trading or easy ways to get in and out of the investment, because it's hard to say I want you to lock up my money for 15 years and not have a lot of rights. Good question. Good title law. Well, first we wanted to expand the market and test it. And so then you ask yourself, well, where can you go? And so there are a couple mitigating factors. What does title law look like? So that hurts you in well, I don't want to point out bad areas, but that can hurt you in a lot of areas of the world. Then you look at, all right, well, what is water like? What do they grow? What are their export markets? And so ultimately, Australia was very attractive. And then we had the combination of some good partners called us up and said, we want to work with you. Here are a bunch of references. Here's the type of work we do. And they checked all the boxes. All right. Thank you all for coming. Don't hesitate to come up after or meet us up at our table upstairs.